Neurodiversity and Family Law Matters, a conversation with Katy Harris. That is your topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hi, everyone. This is Mac PLV. Welcome back to Lawyers, Mediators International Show and Podcast, where we talk about law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Welcome back, Katy Harris. Thank you so much. You are here in the U.S. right now, aren't you?
Yep, I am coming live from Charleston, South Carolina.
Yes. Well, it's good to have you. You were on recently, of course, talking about a topic that's close to your heart, and that is episode 330 was what is MIAM or MIAM, a conversation with you of Mediation Matters Midlands.uk. And people can check out that video. It's from August 16th. And we appreciate you sharing some thoughts with how pre-mediation issues are resolved in your jurisdiction. And you gave a lot of tips on how we can, of course, apply some of those tricks and tips to the U.S. courts as well. But for folks who might not be aware of who you are, you're a pretty big deal. You teach, you travel, you speak all over the world on mediation topics. And so you are a mediator with Mediation Matters Midland, and you have a lot of people who work with you. And so folks can, of course, learn more about you on that website, Mediation Matters Midland. Before we go into the topic, I just want to remind people about the Amicable Divorce Network. That's why you're here this week in South Carolina, in Charleston specifically, because they're having a meeting and you were invited to be a guest speaker, which, of course, you're a member of the network as well.
Yep.
And so and not to be remiss, we need to mention that if people want to hear you speak, but also learn a lot about the latest that's going on in mediation, specifically involving children, they need to head out to London, March 19th to the 20th, where they'll be able to attend the Bridging the Gap Conference 2026, and that's being held in partnership with Amicable Divorce Network and the London Mediation Company, which is your company.
Yeah.
And so folks, head out there. I'm hoping I can go. If I can't, then I'll be on the sidelines cheering you on. But the tickets are live. And so definitely want you to just speak briefly about this event so that folks can know more about it, and then we'll get started.
So just so everyone's clear with what's what. So Mediation Matters Midlands is my main company. The London Mediation Company is kind of my baby company. Amicable Divorce Network is Tracy Ann Moore Grant's company alongside her. She has a law practice as well. And the Bridging the Gap conference is being co-hosted by myself and Tracy. So from the London Mediation Company and the Amicable Divorce Network, we're holding this next March. So this is going to be a conference around bridging the gaps between all of those silos that anyone within family law knows about, those gaps between the courts, the mediators, the solicitors, the real estates, all of those different people who end up often working in silos and not kind of bridging those gaps necessarily. Also linking in with social media, looking at how we can work with social media positively instead of negatively, utilizing that technology. We've got technology, it's not always against us, so we can utilize that in the best way possible. So we've got Stephen Bradley from he delivers a lot of his own talks, but he's from Our Family Wizard. He's going to be talking, I think, on cyber stalking and that kind of harassment via technology. We've got Bill Eddy coming from the High Conflict Institute, along with Megan Hunter from the same. So we've got them travelling over. We have got commitment from the head of the whole of the Family Division of England and Wales, so Andrew McFarland, also coming to open the conference. Myself will be there, Tracy will be there. We've got child psychologists, we've got lawyers, we've got mediators, we've got specialists in domestic abuse. It's going to be a brilliant conference. And just to make it a bit different, we are also going to be joined by a judge. We're going to have a panel discussion on differences that we can manage things in the courts. So I'm currently working on a project in my neighbouring county where we are situated in the courts, and the judges are able to send cases straight out into the external of their courtrooms, into the courthouse, for people to be able to come and mediate, or at least attempt to mediate, find out about the options for that. And we will be having a discussion on how we can develop that kind of system. But also, one of the judges that's on that, he's a retired judge, and I think it would probably be fair to say that he's had enough of the system failing. So he is now putting a lot of his energy into being able to educate and inform people on the different ways that we can manage disputes, and he's using different media facets to do that. So he has written a script and a play, and at the end of day one of our 2-day conference, we will be having live at the conference venue a full-on play on family matters through separation. I think there's an element of domestic abuse within it, but it should be really good. So looking
Cool.
forward to it.
Cool. Well, any kind of storytelling is always a powerful way to convey family law, topics,
Yeah.
because we all know a lot about it through stories. Okay, so let's talk about neurodiversity. This is a topic you were talking about in your speech recently.
Yeah.
Can you first tell us what is neurodiversity and how is it connected to family law?
So, neurodiversity is literally just a way of describing how there is a diverse way of how our brains work. So, it's a different way of thinking. Whereas we've got the neurotypical brain, which is the majority of people have a neurotypical brain. 1 in 7 has a neurodiverse brain. So that would be ADHD, autism, Tourette's, all of those things that fit under that umbrella. And basically, the big difference is the processing. So how we process information, how we certain behaviors, ways that we interpret things. And neurodiverse brains do it in a very different way, not necessarily a bad way, arguably a good way, an even better way. Some people argue that a neurodiverse brain is an evolved brain. It isn't. It is just, I think it's the world's way of ensuring that we continue to think broadly and we don't all remain fully like-minded, because I don't think the world would be
Yeah,
a good place if everyone thought exactly the same way.
got it. Well, thank you for the definition. So, how does it fall in line with family law matters?
So the reason it's important is, so we looked at it today so I was speaking at the conference from 2 perspectives. So 2 perspectives is 2 perspectives. The perspective of the client, as a client with a neurodiverse brain, and the perspective of the client when they have a neurodiverse professional working with them. And then from the opposite lens, so the professional's view and how they can best manage a client with neurodiversity, or how they can best manage their practice when they are neurodiverse as well. Because many of the traits that make people good at their job in family law, so the empaths, the problem solvers, the good negotiators, those that can build a good rapport, many of those traits are traits that are very high on the neurodiverse kind of behaviors list. So things like creativity and lateral thinking, innovation, empathy, all of the problem solving, all of the resilience, all of those things, which can be great, but they also mean that when we are dealing with clients, we just need to be a bit more aware of what the client's needs might be, because they don't necessarily process information in the same way, and they might need a bit of support or an option to manage or process, or even just an additional amount of time to understand and deal with matters that are put forward to them in what would already be quite a stressful situation.
What about in the mediation setting? Like, what is a typical scenario where some of these issues might come up for somebody who has a neurodivergent brain?
So, a lot of things, one of the biggest things is communication, and this has come up throughout the conference. Speakers over the last 2 days, communication is such a huge thing in family law. The tiniest changes make the biggest differences. So, for example, many neurodiverse people might take things their language is different, or they might take things really literally.
Mm.
So, as a mediator, we may say, oh, we'll just come back to that in a moment. And a literal thinker, for example, might kind of check their watch and be like, how have we not come back to this?
Yeah,
And then they lose trust in their mediator, because
mm,
in their mind, they've been made a promise that we're going to come back to that in a minute.
exactly.
And they've taken it quite literally. So things like that. And then where we just language that we use every day that we don't necessarily think about. And this tends to impact, I suppose, people more so that are ASD, so autistic spectrum disorder,
Mhm.
where we would say, for example, take a step back and think about it. They might pause and think, do I literally need to take a step back? So just things about like language and how people process, and maybe understanding more so that neurodiverse people also communicate in a different way. So they'll often struggle with eye contact. And that doesn't mean that they're not listening or they're bored. It just means that for a neurodiverse person to pay attention and retain eye contact continuously is incredibly difficult, because their brains are firing constantly and noticing things over and over again. You're noticing I'm sitting on a balcony right now and there's people moving around me, and I'm kind of like, there's palm trees swaying in the distance. But when you're talking to someone in a room and you're face to face, a neurodiverse person will be talking to them, but they will be seeing things that someone with a neurotypical brain wouldn't notice. They would be looking at your eyes. They'd be like, "Oh, you're blinking. Oh, look, your eyelashes are long, or they're short, or you've got blue eyes, or brown eyes, or you've got beautiful eyes." You know, all of that information is constantly going in, and they're trying to hold this conversation and take information in and absorb it, but at the same time their brain is noticing all of these things surrounding them. So it can be a challenge in that, and I suppose the behaviors of certain of people who have neurodiverse brains can sometimes be misinterpreted. So also their emotions, and in a mediation, um, someone with a neurodiverse brain will often struggle with managing their emotions as well. So they may cry a lot, and the other person will be like, "Oh, you're just after the sympathy vote, or you're just crying for the sake of it, or why are you overreacting?" And as a mediator, we need to be able to say, one, not be impacted or swayed in any way by that, by somebody crying, but by the other person
Mhm.
suggesting that this is a tactic of getting their own way. But we
Mhm.
need to neutralize that as well. We need to reframe. We need to kind of say, okay, how are we best to deal with this? Because actually, you do need some space to be separate and explain that people do deal with things differently, and it's okay. And I'm not going to be impacted by somebody crying. That's okay. That's their way. And we
Yeah.
can deal with that. It's not a problem. But do we need to now move into separate spaces to give you both space, so that the client who's not crying doesn't feel that, someone's trying to get one over on them by crying? And does the other person need to have that space where they can, cry because they need to do that and they need to deal with it? So just things like that, being aware that people deal with things differently. But a big part of it is in how we communicate
Well, thank you
with.
for that.
Okay, no worries.
So you explain the difference between a neurotypical brain and a neurodiverse brain. So for the person like me who's not a specialist in this field, what should I or how should I now, I guess, plan for when I'm going to be doing mediations? How
Yeah.
should I be better prepared?
So, what we were talking about today was looking at how we can make our practices more neuro inclusive.
Mhm.
So, for example, being able to identify somebody who might be neurodiverse. No one's going to appreciate you kind of going, "Hey, dude, have you got ADHD?" um,
Yeah.
so we need to address it differently. So we need to be saying, is there anything that you think would be helpful to you when we move into mediation, into that room? Do you do you have any issue with kind of lighting or sound distractions? Things like if it's in person, I want to say kind of like fidget toys, but that would be really weird, I think, if you walked into someone's office and there were fidget toys on the table. But just things like, like a pen that has the clicky thing on it, or
Yeah.
I was trying to work out whether you guys have blue tack. Blue tack that you use to stick things to the wall. I don't know if you call it blue tack,
We'll probably call it something else, but
but it's like a putty. But
yeah,
it's
it
great.
helps you stick things on the wall. I got it.
Yeah, but it's a great sensory element, and it's something you would see in an
Okay.
office that doesn't seem odd. And
Yeah.
someone wants to pick it up and kind of
Sure.
mess with it.
Yeah.
Just things like that. It's a way of what we call stimming, but
Mm.
people who are neurodiverse do a lot of stimming, so they need to do a lot of like repetitive actions, and it helps them with their processing and things. So massaging a piece of blue tack, or you might see them kind of doing this with their leg, or wobbling their leg, and this is all, or fiddling with their hair like this. They're all stimming things. So just being able to say, is there something you need? Do you need to be facing away from a window? Do you need me to provide you with things in writing as well as, verbally? Do you need me to give you additional time to write things down? And then, so managing the sensory need, identifying respectfully if there are additional needs, managing the sensory needs, so the lighting, the sounds, the textures, if there's something there for them to deal with, adjust your pace and your structure. So someone with a neurodiverse brain might struggle to take in and process a huge amount of information. So there'll be one party often who is able to process effectively, and they can very clearly speak about their views and articulate their needs. But a neurodiverse person might not find that quite so easy. So they might need a little bit of support in rebalancing. So I think as a mediator, we need to remember that we need to be equal, but equal doesn't mean necessarily giving wholly the same. We need to be equitable. So we need to
Yeah.
move both of them to the same level. And then just considering things like different ways of communication and normalizing. So just normalizing that this is okay, this is normal, I understand it, this isn't unusual to me as a mediator, but not pinning someone down. So I think our language again is really important, that if we recognize that someone is struggling, then just saying things like, I need to be able to gauge how to balance this mediation well so that I'm supporting both your needs. Often people have different ways of managing things. One person can be incredibly articulate, but other people might need more time to process and might have lots of questions. How do you think that you're going to need me to support you in this? And addressing it to both people. So it's there, you've identified it, but you're putting it on them to say, what are your needs? And allowing the other person in that moment to hear from the other person, what is it that you need?
Awesome. Lots of really good tips. And I think one of my big takeaways from what you just said is just asking people and being considerate of how, they might need to communicate certain things or want to be heard. That might go a long way towards addressing their concerns without that awkward guessing, I guess. Last thing
Yeah.
you want to do is offend somebody when you didn't intend to. So I think putting it out there and asking, "Hey, how can I meet your needs?" might be the best way. So, last question. I'm pretty big into ODR and online dispute resolution, and of course, mediating online.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that changes things completely when it comes to the whole neurodiversity talk? Because it's one thing to be doing mediations in person, right? You have that person, the in-person vibes and the
Mm-hmm.
human connection that way. That's natural to us for millennia. But once we put the video element into it, and now we are across the ocean and we're looking at through a screen. Do you think that is going to make this topic a whole lot heavier to deal with?
I think what you're describing is now the diversity that we have within mediation, right?
Hmm.
And I think it doesn't matter whether um, it doesn't mean that if you're neurodiverse, then you're going to need something specifically different to someone who's neurotypical. We all have different needs, and a neurodiverse person, a neurotypical person, that one person may prefer online. They're at home. They've got the comfort of their own home. They haven't got to go anywhere. They haven't got to time manage. Those things, there are a lot of the barriers to somebody with neurodiversity, i.e., getting from A to B, the stress, the time management, because time blindness is a huge thing. But at the same time, neurodiverse people will often prefer to be in person because they find this quite a barrier. On the other hand, there may be certainly people with autism often struggle with their communication and their social skills. So this might actually be more beneficial to them. But likewise, there's people who are neurotypical who are going to have preferences, whether it's online or in person. I don't think it's possible to put across the board that, all neurodiverse people are going to need X, Y, and Z, and all neurotypical people are going to need this, because that diversity crosses over both sides. I think the way to look at it is, when we talk often about accessibility, we talk about ramps and captions and hearing loops.
Yeah.
But in mediation, accessibility is cognitive, emotional, and it's often invisible, which means it's easy to overlook. So I think just having that ability to keep those options open, and remember, we have the ability to adapt our practices. We can do in person, we can do online, we can manage things, overcoming barriers like the worry of the technology for someone who might not have a brain that easily manages things like Zoom because they don't normally use it. Offering the option to set up a trial video, let's just make sure all your audio is working. Let's make sure you can link in. Let's make sure there's no worries, so they haven't got that additional worry right immediately before having to have a big conversation with the other person.
Awesome. Good tips. I learn so much whenever I talk to you in all the podcasts that I do. So I appreciate you coming on. But yeah, let's wrap up. So how are you been liking Charleston, South Carolina?
Oh my goodness, it is the most beautiful place. The people are wonderful. I've literally just about an hour ago received a text to tell me we're supposed to be flying to Boston, and then we're supposed to be doing a day in Boston and then flying home. But there's storms apparently on the way, so I think we're going to stay in Charleston for an extra day, which is great. And then we'll fly home to London. But yeah, it's been great. It's beautiful. We're going on a dolphin tour now. So I'm literally about to leave here. I'm going to go get a taxi, and we're going to go on a sunset cruise to go and look for dolphins. So next time you see me, I should have hopefully had a lovely dolphin experience in Charleston.
Cool. Well, enjoy and welcome to the South. The U.S. is very diverse and lots of different places. But yeah, I've been to South Carolina, love it there. So have a safe trip back home to London.
I will do, and I'm sure I'll be back like a boomerang, because I feel like this feels like home.
All right.
So much, Matt. All right, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Katy Harris, thank you so much for stopping by the LMI podcast. Everyone, check this video out and all the other ones on lmipodcast.com, and of course, YouTube channel. Take care. Bye-bye.